Ethan Blackwood, a billionaire known for his sharp business acumen and cold demeanor, stepped out of his sleek black limousine onto the bustling streets of downtown. Dressed in an expensive tailored suit, he barely glanced at the people around him. His mind was fixated on an important meeting, a multi-billion-dollar deal that could change the future of his empire. As he adjusted his cufflinks and prepared to cross the street, a small, frail hand tugged at his sleeve. Ethan frowned, looking down. A little boy, no older than 10, stood before him. His clothes were tattered, his face smudged with dirt, and his eyes, deep, piercing, and strangely familiar, locked onto Ethan's. "Sir, please, just $1." The boy's voice was soft but firm. "I haven't eaten in 2 days." Ethan's first instinct was to ignore him. He had seen beggars before, many of them. In his world, people worked for what they had. He didn't believe in handouts. But something about this child felt different. There was no desperation in his voice, no pleading whimper. Instead, there was a quiet dignity, as if he wasn't meant to be standing there, begging on the streets. A car honked loudly, snapping Ethan out of his thoughts. He sighed, reaching into his pocket. "Fine, take this and—" But before he could hand over a bill, the boy shook his head. "I don't want money," the boy interrupted. "I want 5 minutes of your time." Ethan's eyes narrowed. "Excuse me?" "Just 5 minutes," the boy repeated. "And after that, if you still think I'm just a beggar, I'll never bother you again." Ethan hesitated. His driver was waiting, his meeting was in 15 minutes, and he had a million other things to do. But curiosity gnawed at him. Who was this boy? And why did it feel like he wasn't begging at all, but offering something instead? Ethan Blackwood wasn't a man who wasted time. Every second of his life was planned, calculated, and directed toward success. Yet here he was, standing on a crowded street, staring at a ragged little boy who had just asked for 5 minutes of his time. It was ridiculous, insulting even, but something about the child's unwavering gaze made Ethan pause. There was no fear, no desperation, just confidence. "You have 30 seconds, Ethan said, folding his arms. "Make it count." The boy smirked as if he expected that response. "You're Ethan Blackwood, the billionaire investor, but do you know who I am?" Ethan raised an eyebrow. "Should I?" The boy chuckled. "Not yet, but you will." He took a deep breath and continued. "I know you're about to close a deal with Falcon Industries. You think it's airtight, but it's not. Their financial reports are falsified, and if you go through with the merger, you'll lose billions." Ethan's jaw tightened. No one outside his executive circle knew about the Falcon deal. The boy was bluffing. "This is nonsense," Ethan said, checking his watch. "Where did you hear that?" "From someone who wants to help you," the boy replied. "But you don't believe me. So let's make a bet. Call your legal team, right now. Have them check Falcon's offshore accounts. If I'm wrong, I'll disappear forever. But if I'm right—" He trailed off, his eyes daring Ethan to take the risk. Ethan's gut told him to walk away. But something in the boy's confident stance, the way he spoke as if he knew the inner workings of billion-dollar deals, unsettled him. What if the boy was right? Ethan sighed, pulling out his phone. "Mr. Carter," he said to his attorney, "I need you to run a deep check on Falcon Industries' offshore holdings. Now." As Ethan ended the call, the boy simply smiled. "Good choice," he said. "Now we wait." Ethan Blackwood wasn't the kind of man who entertained foolishness. He had built his empire on logic, precision, and an unshakable instinct for business. But as he stood there, phone in hand, waiting for his attorney to confirm the boy's outrageous claim, doubt crept in. The beggar, if he could even be called that, watched him with a knowing smirk as if he had already won. Ethan hated that look. Minutes passed in silence. Then his phone rang. Mr. Blackwood, his attorney Carter sounded breathless. "You're not going to believe this." Ethan's grip tightened on the phone. "Try me." "There are inconsistencies in Falcon Industries' offshore accounts. We found hidden losses, manipulated earnings, and shell companies siphoning money out of the business. If you sign this deal, you'll be inheriting billions in unreported debt." A chill ran down Ethan's spine. He had been days away from finalizing the merger, one of the biggest in his career. If this information was correct, he had almost walked into financial ruin. His eyes snapped back to the boy. "How did you know?" Ethan demanded. The boy just shrugged. "I told you, I know things." Ethan wasn't in the mood for games. He stepped forward, towering over the child. "That's not an answer." The boy didn't flinch. "It's the only one you're getting right now." He grinned. "But you do owe me something." Ethan scoffed. "And what's that?" "5 more minutes of your time." The boy's voice was calm but firm. "I just saved you from $1 billion disaster. Don't you want to know why?" Ethan clenched his jaw. Every instinct told him to walk away, but something about the boy's confidence made it impossible. "Fine," he said at last. "Talk." The boy's smirk widened. "Good choice, Mr. Blackwood. Let's take a walk." As they stepped away from the busy street, Ethan couldn't shake the feeling that this was only the beginning. Ethan Blackwood wasn't used to taking orders, especially not from a kid in ragged clothes. But here he was, walking beside the boy, following him down a quieter street away from the city's noise. The boy walked with a confidence that didn't match his appearance. It wasn't the hesitant shuffle of a beggar. No, this kid carried himself like someone who knew the world owed him something. Ethan folded his arms. "All right, kid, I gave you 5 minutes. Start talking." The boy stopped near a worn-out bench and gestured for Ethan to sit. Ethan hesitated, but finally sank down. "My name is Oliver," the boy said. "And I know you, Mr. Blackwood. Everyone does. Billionaire, power broker, a man who thinks money can solve anything." Ethan smirked. "It usually does." Oliver chuckled. "That's where you're wrong." He leaned in. "What if I told you that the power you think you have, the control over your empire, it's all an illusion?" Ethan narrowed his eyes. "Go on." "You nearly lost everything today," Oliver continued, "and you didn't even see it coming. If someone like me, a kid from the streets, could see it before you did, then what does that say about your power?" Ethan clenched his jaw. He didn't like this. He didn't like him, this street kid talking down to him like he was the fool. But the worst part, the kid wasn't wrong. "You're stalling," Ethan said coldly. "Tell me how you knew about Falcon Industries." Oliver smiled. "Because I'm not who you think I am." Ethan frowned. "And who exactly are you?" Oliver leaned back, stretching his arms over the bench. "Let's just say, I come from a family that knows things. Big things. Things that could ruin men like you in a single day." Ethan's pulse quickened. He had spent decades navigating boardrooms, playing mind games with the most powerful people in the world. But this was different. For the first time in years, he was the one caught off guard. "Your 5 minutes are up," Oliver said. "Now, do you want to know the rest, or are you too scared to hear it?" Ethan didn't move. He should have walked away. But he didn't, because for the first time in his life, he was afraid of what he didn't know. Ethan leaned forward, his sharp gaze locked onto Oliver. He wasn't a man who scared easily, but something about this boy unsettled him. He had power, not the kind that came from wealth, but something deeper, knowledge. "All right, kid," Ethan said, his voice calm but firm. "You have my attention. Who are you, really?" Oliver smirked as if enjoying the billionaire's discomfort. "That's the right question, Mr. Blackwood. But the better question is, who do you think I am?" Ethan studied him carefully. The boy's tattered clothes suggested poverty, but his words carried the weight of someone who had seen the world from the top. His confidence wasn't just arrogance, it was earned. "I don't play games," Ethan warned. "Then you're in the wrong business," Oliver shot back. "Because that's all your world is, isn't it? A game of power and money. The difference between you and me? You play it from the boardroom. I play it from the streets." Ethan narrowed his eyes. "You still haven't answered my question." Oliver sighed, then pulled something from his pocket, a small, folded-up photograph. He handed it to Ethan without a word. Ethan unfolded it, and his breath caught in his throat. It was an old picture. A man in a tailored suit stood beside a boy, no older than 5. The man had piercing eyes, a strong jaw, and an air of authority that was impossible to ignore. Ethan recognized him instantly. "Charles Kingston," he whispered. The name alone sent a chill down his spine. Charles Kingston had been one of the most feared and respected businessmen in the world, a ruthless tycoon who had built an empire from the ground up. He had disappeared years ago, leaving behind rumors of betrayal, secret deals, and a fortune hidden away. Ethan looked back at Oliver, his mind racing. "You're his son," Ethan said, realization dawning. Oliver nodded. "And that means I know things that could destroy you, Mr. Blackwood. Things my father never wanted the world to know." Ethan clenched the photograph, feeling a rare sense of unease. He had walked into this conversation thinking he was dealing with a street beggar. Instead, He had just stepped into a war. Ethan's grip tightened on the photograph, his mind racing with the implications. Charles Kingston. That name was a ghost from the past, one that carried weight in the world of billionaires and power players. But he had vanished without a trace years ago. And now, standing before him, was the man's son, a boy who had been living on the streets. "How is this possible?" Ethan asked, his voice quieter now. Oliver leaned back against the park bench, crossing his arms. "It's a long story, Mr. Blackwood, one that you might not like." Ethan's jaw tightened. "Try me." Oliver exhaled slowly, his sharp eyes scanning Ethan's face as if deciding how much to reveal. "My father wasn't just a businessman. He was a strategist, a master manipulator. He built his empire with the right alliances and the right enemies, but someone betrayed him." Ethan frowned. "And you think I had something to do with it?" Oliver shrugged. "I know you did." Ethan's heart skipped a beat. "That's ridiculous. Your father disappeared when you were just a kid. I had nothing to do with that." Oliver smirked, his expression unreadable. "Maybe not directly, but you profited from it, didn't you? My father's company, Kingston Industries, was dismantled piece by piece after his disappearance. And guess who bought up most of the pieces?" Ethan felt a sudden wave of unease. Kingston Industries had been one of the most powerful corporations in the world, but after Charles Kingston's disappearance, it had collapsed almost overnight. Ethan's own company had acquired several key assets during that time, expanding his reach and influence, but he had never questioned why Kingston had vanished. Until now. Oliver continued, his voice cold. "Someone set my father up, someone powerful, and I intend to find out who." Ethan's mind raced. If what Oliver was saying was true, then someone had orchestrated the fall of one of the greatest business empires in history. And now, years later, the heir to that empire had returned, determined to uncover the truth. Ethan looked at the boy in front of him, dirty, scrappy, but undeniably sharp. "Why tell me all this?" Ethan asked carefully. Oliver's smirk faded. "Because you're part of the puzzle, Mr. Blackwood. Whether you like it or not, you're involved." Ethan's stomach tightened. He had spent years at the top, navigating power plays and corporate warfare, but for the first time in a long time, he wasn't sure if he was the predator or the prey. Ethan leaned forward, his sharp gaze locked onto Oliver. The boy's words had shaken him, but he wasn't about to show it. In the business world, hesitation was weakness. "You think I played a role in your father's downfall," Ethan said, voice measured. "But why would I sabotage a man like Charles Kingston? What would I gain from it?" Oliver smirked. "Power, control, the same things you have now." Ethan exhaled, shaking his head. "You're reaching, kid." Oliver's eyes darkened. "Am I?" He pulled something else from his pocket, a small, crumpled piece of paper. He unfolded it carefully and placed it on the bench between them. Ethan picked it up, recognizing the faded ink. It was an old newspaper clipping. The headline read, "Billionaire Charles Kingston mysteriously disappears. Company in turmoil." Beneath the headline was a smaller section of text, highlighting how Kingston's assets were quickly bought up after his disappearance. And there it was. Ethan's name. Blackwood Enterprises acquires key holdings of Kingston Industries. Ethan clenched his jaw. He remembered this. At the time, it had seemed like a golden opportunity. Kingston Industries had crumbled, and he had capitalized on the chaos, but he had never questioned the why behind it all. "Coincidence?" Oliver asked, watching him closely. Ethan exhaled through his nose. "I don't believe in coincidences." "Neither do I," Oliver said, voice sharp. "That's why I need answers, and I think you might have them." Ethan met the boy's gaze. He was impressed. Oliver wasn't just another street kid. He was calculating, relentless, and dangerously intelligent. But this was a dangerous game to play. If Oliver was right, if Kingston's downfall had been engineered, then there were powerful people who wouldn't want the truth coming out. Ethan rubbed his temples. "If I help you, I could be putting myself in danger." Oliver tilted his head. "Scared, Mr. Blackwood?" Ethan smirked. "Not at all. I just don't like playing games where I don't know the rules." Oliver leaned in. "Then let's change that. Let's find out who really pulled the strings. Because if my father was betrayed, then whoever did it might still be out there." Ethan sat back, considering. He had spent his life making ruthless decisions, but something about this felt different. There was a storm coming, and for the first time in years he wasn't sure if he was ready for it. He had no idea that by helping Oliver, he was about to uncover a truth that could destroy everything he had built. Ethan Blackwood sat in his study that evening, the dim glow of his desk lamp casting long shadows over the room. He held the old newspaper clipping in his hands, his mind racing with possibilities. Had Charles Kingston truly been betrayed? And if so, who had orchestrated his downfall? He tapped his fingers against his mahogany desk. There was only one person who might have answers: Victor Langley. Langley had been Kingston's closest business partner before the collapse. He had vanished from the public eye shortly after, retreating to a quiet life in the countryside. If anyone knew what had really happened, it was him. Ethan pulled out his phone and dialed a private number. After 3 rings, a gruff voice answered. Blackwood, didn't expect to hear from you. I need to talk, Victor, about Charles Kingston. Silence, then a deep sigh. You really want to dig up that grave? I don't have a choice, Ethan said. I think someone wanted him gone, and now his son is looking for answers. Another pause. Then Langley's voice dropped to a whisper. Meet me tomorrow. The old winery outside the city. Midnight. Ethan frowned. Why the secrecy? Because if you're asking these questions, someone might already be watching. The line went dead. Ethan sat back, tension tightening his chest. This wasn't just about business anymore. This was about something bigger and something darker. He reached for his drink, but stopped short when he noticed a movement outside his window. A shadow, gone in an instant. His heartbeat quickened. Was someone already watching him? Ethan Blackwood drove down the empty countryside road, his headlights cutting through the thick fog that clung to the earth like a silent predator. The old winery loomed in the distance, its abandoned structure barely visible against the dark sky. As he pulled up, he noticed another car parked near the entrance. A dim light flickered inside the building. Victor Langley was already waiting. Ethan stepped out cautiously, his polished shoes crunching against the gravel. His instincts told him to be on high alert. Something about this meeting felt dangerous. Inside, Langley sat at an old wooden table, a single lantern illuminating his weathered face. He looked up as Ethan approached. You came, Langley muttered, taking a slow sip from a flask. That means you're serious. Ethan sat down. I want to know the truth about Charles Kingston. Did someone set him up? Langley sighed, rubbing his temples. It was bigger than just a setup, Blackwood. Kingston wasn't just betrayed, he was erased. Ethan frowned. By who? Langley glanced around nervously, then leaned in. There were people who wanted him gone, people in power. Kingston knew too much. He was close to exposing something dangerous. Ethan's chest tightened. What was he trying to expose? Langley hesitated, his eyes flickering toward the entrance as if expecting someone to barge in. I don't know everything, but I know this. He found something about a secret fund, money being funneled into places it shouldn't have been. He was going to blow the whistle. Ethan clenched his fists, and they made sure he never got the chance. Langley nodded grimly. And now, you're asking the same questions, which means you're already in danger. Suddenly, a noise echoed from outside. Footsteps. Langley's expression turned to pure fear. They found us. Ethan's pulse spiked. Who was out there? And were they here to silence them both? Ethan's breath hitched as the footsteps outside grew louder. The air inside the old winery felt thick with tension. Langley's fingers twitched toward his coat pocket, likely reaching for a weapon. Stay quiet, Ethan whispered, his eyes locked on the entrance. The door creaked open slowly, and a tall figure stepped into the dim light. Ethan's muscles tensed, ready for a fight, until he recognized the man's face. It was Detective Grayson Wells. Ethan exhaled sharply. Grayson, what the hell are you doing here? The detective looked between Ethan and Langley, his jaw clenched. I could ask you the same thing. Langley leaned back in his chair, smirking. Let me guess, you were followed? Grayson shot him a cold glare. No, but you both need to leave. Now. Ethan frowned. Not until I get answers. What happened to Charles Kingston? Grayson hesitated before lowering his voice. Kingston was close to uncovering something massive, something that could bring down people in high places. And now, those same people know you're looking into it. Ethan's stomach dropped. You mean? Yes, Grayson cut in. They know about you, and if you keep digging, you'll end up just like Kingston. Langley scoffed. That's what they want, isn't it? To keep us scared, to keep us quiet. Grayson's expression darkened. This isn't a game, Langley. These people don't issue warnings. They eliminate threats. A sudden noise outside made all three men freeze. A car engine rumbled in the distance, then shut off. Ethan turned to Grayson. Are you sure you weren't followed? Grayson's eyes narrowed. Run. Before Ethan could react, the sound of heavy boots echoed outside. Someone was coming. And this time, they weren't here to talk. Ethan's pulse pounded in his ears as the heavy footsteps outside grew closer. The dim light inside the abandoned winery flickered, casting long shadows against the walls. Out the back, Grayson whispered urgently, motioning toward a narrow passageway. Langley hesitated. And run like scared little rats? Not my style. Ethan gritted his teeth. Then stay and get yourself killed. A sharp knock on the door sent a jolt of fear through them. Whoever was outside wasn't trying to be discreet. Grayson pulled his gun, signaling for Ethan and Langley to move. Go, now. Ethan grabbed Langley by the arm and dragged him toward the exit. They slipped through the passageway, stepping into the cold night air. The alley behind the winery was dark, but they weren't safe yet. Then, the door burst open behind them. A deep, gravelly voice rang out. Carter, Langley, don't bother running. Ethan turned, his blood running cold. A man stood in the doorway, silhouetted against the dim light. Derek Calloway, the billionaire's personal enforcer. Langley cursed under his breath. Damn it, this just got worse. Calloway took a slow step forward, flanked by two more men in dark suits. You boys have been poking your noses where they don't belong. Ethan's hands clenched into fists. Kingston didn't deserve to die. Calloway smirked. Maybe not, but you might. The enforcer raised a hand, and his men drew their weapons. Ethan's heart slammed against his ribs. They were outnumbered, outgunned, and out of time. Then, from the darkness, a single gunshot rang out, and chaos erupted. The gunshot shattered the night, and for a split second, everything froze. Then, chaos. Calloway's men spun around, weapons raised, scanning the darkness. Another shot rang out, and one of them collapsed, groaning. Move! Ethan shouted, yanking Langley behind a stack of crates as bullets tore through the alley. Grayson returned fire, taking cover behind a rusted dumpster. We need to get out of here. From the shadows, a voice echoed. Drop your weapons, now. Ethan's breath caught, that voice, familiar, commanding. Then, stepping into the dim light, came a figure none of them expected, the little beggar boy. Except he wasn't just a beggar. He was flanked by men in tactical gear, all armed to the teeth. His tattered clothes were gone, replaced by a sharp, tailored suit. Calloway's face twisted in shock. You? The boy's lips curled into a smirk. Surprised? Ethan's mind reeled. Who was this kid? The boy stepped forward. I gave you a chance, Calloway. You didn't take it. Calloway's hands tightened into fists. You're supposed to be dead. The boy chuckled. That's what everyone thought. His gaze shifted to Ethan. I told you, Carter, looks can be deceiving. Ethan's heart pounded. This wasn't just a street kid. This was someone powerful, someone dangerous. The boy raised a hand. His men aimed their weapons. Calloway's face went pale. He knew he had lost. Ethan exhaled. The game had just changed, and the truth was more shocking than he ever imagined. If you were shocked by this twist, imagine what other secrets could be hidden in plain sight. Share your thoughts in the comments. Did you see it coming? And don't forget to like, share, and subscribe for more mind-blowing stories. Stay tuned for the next thrilling tale. You won't want to miss it.